Welcome to episode 23 of the International Web Effectiveness Podcast, where Bill Hunt and I, Bill Scully, focus on the strategies and techniques necessary to improve your web presence and manage your global websites. In our last episode, we discussed consolidating market-specific websites from a dedicated website into a language-only version and the business implications of not doing it correctly, and we gave tips on what would be the right way to do. That one had a lot of great insights and interesting discussions. I think you should check that out. In this episode, we're going to discuss the various KPIs and the key factors startup CEOs must focus on to ensure their organization is rocking. But before that, there was an interesting news article you shared with me about merging content, which ties back to our last podcast, where there was discussion. And, why did you think that was interesting for you to share?
So, in the last episode, we were talking about taking like a top-level domain and merging it, getting rid of a Germany website and folding it into like a German language website. And I thought it was interesting because somebody asked John a question and said, hey, I've merged these two pieces of content. And, it's sort of rolled out, but I still see the old URL and I see old stuff. And John made the point of saying, to sort of quote, merging is always a bit more challenging than a simple site move, right? So when you're blending this content and basically said, pretty much what we were saying, right? Expect challenges. And you said, really all you have to do is give it some time. And then there was a second piece, which the person had when they were in their, like you said, when he was in Gmail and he did certain queries, he would see the old URL being shown, even though it had been redirected and was missing from Google. And John said, yeah, that happens because you specifically are asking about this URL. And so we don't completely terminate it. There's some nuance in his statement, but I thought that's what was interesting. It was explicitly stating that when we're blending content, that can be more challenging in many cases for Google than just a wholesale, complete redo or refresh or, shutting A down and folding it completely into B.
Yeah, I think it's pretty complex, especially when you're merging content involves consolidating information from multiple pages into a single URL. Google's got to process the new URL. It's got to process the redirect. It's going to have an impact on personalized search results. Even after you implement the 301 directs, users may still encounter the old URLs in search for a while. And then, it has to go through all of the system updates. So not as easy as just moving stuff and changing URLs.
Yeah, I have a whole section about blending and merging and consolidating in the guides we're working on around site migrations. And, this is becoming it's becoming pretty robust, the different nuances we have to deal with. And I came across a screen capture I did of a comment from Gary saying, basically every thing you change adds an exponential amount of complexity to Google figuring it out. Exactly as you said, if URL changed, if we blended things, if you had a dedicated page for a particular topic and now it's a bullet point, in a separate piece of content, there's implications. But this is one of those things that you have to pay attention to what you're doing. And I think in a way it leads into today's discussion because, one of the key thoughts that I have is this is a team sport. And we need multiple people to play along and understand where search fits into the equation. So I don't want to steal your thunder, so I'll let you tee up this episode.
You're not stealing any thunder here. Yeah, so you had written an article recently. It looked like you needed to get some stuff off your chest. It was called Beyond Marketing, the Startup CEO's Guide to Making SEO Everyone's KPI. And did you just write this? Was this a result of our conversation the other day?
Yeah, it was the other day. It was a two-purpose. One, I was pretty amped up after a couple conversations with both some investors in these companies and their CEOs, and then I actually used it to fulfill one of the course requirements in an AI course I was in, to use AI to write something from a couple key thoughts and see how AI would do it. So a couple things in here I probably will change, but they were sort of the output. The requirement was it had to be the output of AI with some moderate adjustments. But yeah, so these two conversations, I had been introduced to these guys by someone, and it was an interesting setup because in both cases I was talking to the investors, and then the investors, summoned the CEOs to join, and they're busy people. And basically they said, look, you know, organic search traffic is mission critical for us to hit our goals. And we're talking to a bunch of different search people. And so, basically both essentially said, what's your secret sauce? And I said, well, as the person who introduced us said, I don't really do search anymore. And so where I can help you is, pointing you in the right direction and changing your thinking. And again, that's why the investors had the CEOs join, because in the 5 to 10 minutes we were chatting, it was different than what they had been hearing. And it was really interesting. One of them seemed a little frustrated. He's like, dude, what's the secret sauce? How are you different? And I said, well, let me ask you 3 questions. One was, and in both cases, they were going to make money through subscriptions. And I said, okay, how many subscriptions has SEO generated? And there was a pause. And, to me, being, I think, an overly logical person, if you're the CEO of a company that's just told me subscriptions are how you make your money, and B, organic search is critical to how you make your money, then you should know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Then I said, and you've slightly variation, it said, what phrases, pages, concepts, topics generated that? And again, crickets, because, again, if they couldn't answer the first one, it's highly unlikely they can answer the second one. And then I asked the question, okay, who owns SEO? It was sort of a trick question, because if you're telling me it's the essence of how you're going to make money, it is the primary driver that you want, may not be what will happen, because you will have to use social media, you will have to use all the other brilliant forms of marketing. But if you open a conversation, especially with somebody like me, and give me that soundbite, I'm going to wield it like a stick, they told me later, that don't beat us to death over that concept. And that's what I put in the article, was what really triggered the rant, is like, if that's your thing, dude, you need to understand this. And so as I was talking to them, I said, okay, so we need to create, one thing I would do with you is help you create both macro and micro topics and performance KPIs and a mindset around making search a team sport. And I said, what kind of capabilities do you have? And one said, man, we've got these amazing content people and they're cranking out content. And the other is like, well, honestly, my engineering thinks search or SEO is a black box. And that's why we want somebody with secret sauce and, all the keys to the kingdom. And I said, well, the first thing we need to do is, we need to make sure that people don't know there is no secret sauce and that there is, no black box. It's pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah.
Search engines need to be able to get to your content. They need to be able to score your content. And an interesting thing that I don't hear people say enough, it's got to be equal to or better, preferably, than what they already have, right? They don't need a blue one, green one, purple one, right? How is it going to determine if yours is as good as what they already have? And that's where, the authority signals and all that. We're not going to go into SEO 101, but if you think about those, right? And what roles, and I've always focused on 4 and now a 5th variable. Number 1 is indexing, right? Who affects indexing? It's almost 100% on engineering, right? Can the site be crawled? Can it be indexed? If you're launching this, uber heavy React site that, it takes a massive rendering engine and, just to extract URLs out for crawling, you expect some problems, right? Then the next part of the equation is relevance. What is this content about? That's both a function of engineering in terms of template creation. How did we present the content and the content people? So that's a dual task, two people, two roles. And then number three in sort of my hierarchy is authority. Who else thinks this content is topically relevant, authoritative, and are they themselves authoritative? So who does this? Well, we could argue it's content because they write the stuff that people want to link to, but it's also PR, external relations, influencers, evangelists, all the different methods you use to get your word out. And this is this beautiful kumbaya relationship between all the other forms of marketing and creating this brilliant content. And then number four, which nobody ever really talks about, is clickability. I think clickability now is really coming into vogue because of, AI answers and zero click and all those things. People are really now starting to agonize over, okay, I'm ranking number two and people are looking for Lenovo laptops and we're only getting a 2% click rate because 98% of people looking for Lenovo laptops for some reason aren't clicking on Lenovo's organic listing.
Yeah.
So is it the stuff that's above it that's better? Or is it because it's literally above it? That type of thing. And then the last one that I've added sort of recently is the usability side. We're hearing this more and more is if a search engine has a choice between two pages to put in their search results, and both are relatively the same, they're both authoritative, the content is both good, the content is both unique, it answers it, but one is like painfully slow to load. And the other one is lightning fast. Which of the two might they show to people? The lightning fast, right? And so who impacts speed? And now this is where we get into, again, a multi-audience. We've got engineering that controls this. We've got content to some degree, UX to a big degree, because we got to have it look a certain way. I've talked in some writings I did recently about battles I've had with UX people that said we can only have our font on the page. And if we can't have our font, it's got to be in an image. So it's like, okay, if there's no text, you're never going to rank. So these kind of things mean that's a team sport. So basically summing up the rant, it was the article I listed what I thought were KPIs that were a flavor of sort of letting them put their skin in the game from a search perspective, sort of like taking, and we talked about this before, Core Web Vitals and some of the page speed and stuff like that. Well, really everybody should care about that. Like UX should care. How quickly does it load? How many scripts and all that stuff, right? There's multiple people that should care about this. But it's really that search person that's hammering on these silly metrics that we see, in Lighthouse and stuff like that, saying, hey, you've got 47 things nobody's even going to look at loading before you even get your brand name out there.
Right.
It's that stuff. So asking engineering, how are you contributing to improving the score that the search people care about? I mean, these are some of the things like that. Are we factoring in stuff? And I'll sort of pause, take a breath, because I know there's a few questions you want to ask about just thinking about these team sport KPIs where, being, again, it's like if you take football, you could have the best quarterback in the world. And I'm not a big football person, but I heard there was a stat that saying something about there's never been, and maybe this was, I don't remember if this was NFL or college team. They said something about the team that had the better quarterback has never won unless they had an equally high rated defense.
That makes a lot of sense.
It makes sense, right?
You
got a person who can
sort of like the weakest link.
Exactly, right?
You
can have a great offense.
Your weakest person in the process.
Right. And that's sort of my point is, right, you can have the best quarterback, but if the linemen don't protect the quarterback and the people who catch the ball can't catch the ball, you're not going to score points. And then the reverse of that is if the defense can't prevent the other team from throwing the ball and catching the ball and running the ball, then you can't win, right? So that's what makes it a team sport. And I think, we can think the same way with search. Now, one of the things that I did point out, anticipating pushback when I posted this on LinkedIn, I put the air quotes and the prefaces on startup CEOs because I've had two people privately say, dude, there's no CEO that's going to look at this stuff. There's no CEO that's going to look at a search dashboard. And I had to correct him. So I never said a search dashboard. I never said search anything. And then, so I re-qualified it very specifically to startup CEOs. And then, in a moment, I want to talk about some of the, and then, so while I did have a list of KPIs, I then had a longer list of what I thought questions that I think any CEO may want to ask, but specifically startup CEOs, especially a startup CEO that's saying they need organic search traffic to complete their mission. So I'll be quiet for a second and hit me with your questions.
No. So I took a different approach to this episode. I was thinking, a CEO has 30 minutes to meet with the digital team. So I didn't limit it to just SEO. And I was thinking of how to get my digital team to think like a business person. And so I came up with some questions like, what are our top 3 website KPIs and how have they trended over the last quarter? And I think from a CEO standpoint, that tells you a lot about your digital team if they have KPIs that make sense. And, I'm working now with one company where the KPIs come down from heaven with no thought. But this is the division that's done really well in comparison to all the other divisions, yet they're being held to the same CDMO. And it's almost impossible to make these numbers in growth that they're expecting these other companies who've never done any web or SEO stuff before. So like in this case, if I had the chance, I would have said what the problem is. If there was a problem with the site, like as an example, if you were hit with helpful content update, one KPI might be the number of pages that you rewrite. And then how does that compare to the growth rate as far as what other KPIs you're tracking? Like could be, there's zero click rate. So there's lots of different ways to look at this. You could look at it from a traffic standpoint. You could look at it from a ranking standpoint. Other things would be other questions like which channels are driving the most qualified traffic to our site, and then you need to define what's qualified, right? So you could ask things like what are different conversion rates, like visited a free trial or a demo. What's the free trial to a paid? If you're a B2B, lead to opportunity, and then you can define what the qualified and the marketing qualified leads are. But I have a whole bunch here. Do you have any questions about these?
No, but I'm going to push back a little bit.
Okay.
I'm actually going to put on my CEO hat. I think you're saying the same thing. But, in those, honestly, again, those are just like dashboard things. I'd want to know, what are you doing? Like the 1 point thing that I've always asked is, of those, what are we doing to get more? Like, I really love the question, what channels are working well? And that's one of them that I have that the CEO should ask. For marketing, again, what is this? How have we aligned search with other marketing activities? But going back to that, let's drill down into the one of those. You saying this, we had this many coming to the pipeline, and we had this many do this, and we had this many do this. The one question that I always ask is, how do we get more of them? What is driving that, right? And that's a filter question that I think a lot of people, especially when we get into this dashboard mindset, we're not ever asking that question of how do we get more of those? Have you isolated that? Because I do think the one thing you just said that is so true, KPIs come from high. And often there's no thought or backfill into how you will do them. I saw today that Google just launched this new open source sort of marketing mix tool, right? And, having been part of the Ogilvies and Young and Rubicams, and, they do a lot of this marketing mix modeling to say, yeah, okay, we're going to take 10% of our profit or our income and we're going to dump it into marketing and we expect this much goodness to happen. Or magically it's going to hit this 5% or 2% revenue increase that we told, Wall Street that we're going to hit. And then it's up to the masses to figure out how to hit those. And I think this is where the doers need to be better at communicating. So I think it was episode 21. We said, why doesn't digital? And I think this is an offshoot. Those questions are exactly the offshoot out that came out of that was, how do we get digital people, and again, using the higher order concept of digital, to present things more strategically, to come back. Like one of the things that I realized when I left Global Strategies and I was doing my final presentation at IBM to the senior executives was none of them had seen any of our reports because they were beneath them to see the reports. At most, it might have been one or two nuggets that rolled up in. And here I'm in front of all these senior vice presidents basically saying, hey, I'm moving on and you're going to be in good hands. And as I started, it was my chance to say, hey guys, you guys are sort of, not really doing your part here. As I challenged them with that, they're like, well, what do you mean? I didn't know this. And so I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. So I'm going to tell them how they're, screwing up. And they had no idea because they were being shielded from a lot of this. And that's one of the things that I think that maybe if I had a subliminal message here is, if you as the senior leader ask questions, it's going to force people to answer things slightly differently than if they're feeding them into a KPI machine.
Right.
Like your question about what channels are working. That's somebody saying, these are the channels that are working. Then to me, the next one is, okay, how are we maximizing that channel? Did we take any learnings from that channel?
Other bottlenecks,
Other bottlenecks, right.
Can we reduce the friction in the user journey?
Exactly.
But you mentioned something that we always think about, but I don't think it really came out in our conversations today, is making sure that what you're doing ties back to the business. Like traffic does not equal revenue. And
exactly.
You need to know, and sometimes revenue isn't the only main mission for the company. And, all of those things need to trickle down into the different divisions, and the divisions need to support that because, yes, business is a team sport.
So, that's a great point. We talked about this in the why isn't digital and why isn't search, really got a lot of sort of quality time with the C-suite. And we talked about the C-suite really cares about two things, one, shareholder value, which is making money and saving money. It's all about, it's the profit and loss statement, right? That's really what it comes down to. And that's an interesting point. Are we also doing things where we can show we save money?
Yep.
Right. And that's one of the things we've tried to do, especially on the search side is, I remember a couple places we did these, called them code jams, but they were really, and you can't really use hackathon anymore because it has a different thing, but we were going to, figure out how to optimize scripts to make things load faster. And, I remember pushing this number that came out of ESPN that by optimizing their scripts, taking out unnecessary stuff, combining them, making them more efficient, they saved like $1 million a month in server costs. One of the interesting things with that I put in here is a question for customer success. How can a better search presence reduce our support costs?
Yeah.
There's no revenue on that, right? These are people who've already bought from us, but imagine, the surprise if they went into our site search or if they went into Google and put in their error code that is so cryptic, you have to Google the error code just to figure out what the hell it is. And,
there's all kinds of, threads that you can pull on that, monthly recurring revenue. What's your churn rate?
Exactly.
Why are they churning? Value and how long is your average customer lifetime? Can you increase that? There's so many things you could do digitally to help those numbers.
And I think, again, going back to pulling that thread on digital, I remember for one client, I was prepping, I'd been told that we needed to do a Latin America roadshow. And the Latin America digital manager, he said he did everything humanly possible to prevent my trip, even though he wasn't paying for it because he didn't believe in search. He believed in, he's the digital guy, so he clearly believed in digital, but he liked the sexy digital.
Yeah.
And the cool digital. And it was really interesting. And I remember we did a meeting in HQ, and I asked him in front of all the other digital market managers and in front of the global head of digital, dude, why are you blocking me? Why are you hating on search? And he goes, because we have other things that we believe are more effective. And he said, until you can show me how search, and it wasn't just paid search or organic search or site search, if you can show me how search can benefit, and more importantly, the word he used was amplify my other forms of marketing, I'll give you a shot. And that was like such an epiphany to me on how to communicate with people. I'm like, oh my God, dude, I'm going to buy you the first drink when we're out tonight. Because, I mean, if you think about it, right? He did it thinking I was a one trick pony as the search person. And so, the next day when we all met again, I said, hey, if I can have 15 minutes, I have a really quick presentation of how I've tied search to every type of marketing we've done. And the guy actually was the first person to clap because now, and in the end, what he told me is, I can't really sell in search is another thing to do because that's how they were viewing it. We have to change stuff on the website. We have to change code on the website. We have to change content on the website. We have to change. And many of their team had been through this before where, the next quarter they were unraveling stuff the previous consultant told them to do that the new consultant told them was bad. And so by tying search, every other digital thing, I mean, a cool one was simply saying, hey, we're doing a TV commercial. So we're going to extract and we're going to think about this TV commercial. And if somebody saw it and didn't remember us, our product, or who, how might they search for it to find that commercial?
And you spend all this money and time and energy to create a commercial, and it's, it runs for a month and then there's no life. But there is a life because you've made an impression, and people might want to go back and they might do I've actually seen for one client where people searched with the word TV ad in it.
Yeah, they want to see the ad, especially this time of year around Super Bowl. Or people want to see, whoever's Super Bowl ad. And the interesting thing was for this client, one of the things that people wanted to know, who did the music, because they used a lot of sort of almost their musicians, around some very interesting genres. And so, here you've got a commercial that's launching and somebody they may have never been heard in Colombia or Mexico City. And magically they're on the TV and it's like, oh, I like the sound of that. Who did that? Right. And that was like, when I said this, there was like 5 or 6 people sort of sit back in their chair and it's like, oh my God, we need to think about this. Then we get into legal discussion. Okay, we've got rights and we've got to list it. Then you get into all the other reasons why people don't come up with creative ideas because you've now just created 6 hours of additional work for people. But the point is by tying it to this, we were now doing this. And again, in one regard, this is the CMO's job, is to say, okay, how are we going to tie this together? I'll give you another example where I hijacked a KPI that I had no business hijacking to try to get search elevated in their thinking. And they come out with a ECRM KPI. We wanted 25 million people in our ECRM database by the end of the year. And search wasn't even in the equation. It wasn't in there. And so what I did is one of the questions that I put that I think a C-level executive, definitely a startup CEO or CMO should ask is, what is driving signups? And you alluded to this with getting people into the MQLs and, those qualified leads buckets. What was the page that they were on when they signed up for the email form? What was the concept maybe that triggered it? One thing we did with a lot of tech B2B clients was back when they were all using click to call, when it was all the rave, we used to have, when they would click to call, We would capture the page they were on. When we had organic search queries, and we still did it with paid, we would pass the query that brought them to the page, and then when they got on the line with the operator, we would say, so how were you looking at if we knew, because it would
Yeah.
show up that they came from paid or organic search. You were looking for this, and they would basically, put that into their notes, and we could mine that. And it was really interesting, extracting the search query, the page, mapping that to the role, to the problem statement. It was such a gold mine that, people are, oh my God, this is what the problem they were. And so we started to get senior marketing people to say, okay, what was the page or the query they used before they went into the queue? It's almost like the question that every marketer is always, how'd you find us?
Yeah.
Right? When they call in, oh, how'd you find us? And very few people have even went the next step. Search, great. What queries did you use? So those type of things. So this is really what we're saying is this team sport. And I think that the CEO or a senior leader's role is to, and in the article I specifically put, to empower and enforce the team nature of this. Because I think if the senior leader is asking these questions, that maybe through that osmosis, other people will want to play along. Like one question we talked about before we jumped on is to ask engineering, what's blocking us from a perfect Core Web Vital score? If the CEO knows what the hell Core Web Vital score is, more power to them. So that's sort of an AI question that was stuck in here. But it's the right question is, what's preventing us from making our website faster? What's preventing us from getting a better score that the search team is complaining about that we're still underperforming? So when we hear a senior leader ask that of engineering to sort of understand a barrier that another team member has, it's forcing cross-pollination.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a stat the other day. It's like 95% of prospects do their own research before talking to a human sales rep. That was from HubSpot in 2024. So, you can't say that the web doesn't contribute to everything a business does.
Right.
I want to remind people of our free Facebook group where we use that as an opportunity to discuss these things, and you can ask any questions you want. You can also suggest ideas for upcoming podcasts. You can find that by searching International Web Mastery Free Group.
And we see this again, those factors. If you have a slow website, and this is the interesting thing, or are you looking at speed? It's just one example from an engineering perspective in other markets. I think I told you this before, many, 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 many years ago. We were hired by an agency. This is my first agency. We were hired to do the localization into Japanese of a major company's website. And when I went and met with them, because it was down to us and one other localization, and they liked us because we knew about this thing called the internet. The other people were just a localization firm. The guy was so pleased with an image they created. He goes, let me show you this. We've got this image where the person reaches out and touches this like little pool, and it's got the ripples. And he goes, this image is awesome. And he's giving me the metaphor for it. And then, so we go in this room, and I'm like, why are we here? And he goes, oh, this is the room that has the T1 line. So one room, the server room, had the T1 line. Nobody else, because everybody else is on dial-up. And then this was for Japan, where if you had a 56 baud, you were high speeding it. So again, the point of this was we had to go to see this magical image that was going to be on a web page. We had to go in a room that had a high-speed connection that probably fewer than 10% of companies had, let alone any user. And that's what they were going to put on the web page because it was cool. And I think like these are the kind of things.
I was a product manager in a municipal engineering company for a very technical product. And the marketing person came up to me and said, look at this really cool brochure we just created, and never once spoke to me. And it didn't touch any of the points that another engineer would use to make a decision.
I
Team
mean,
sport.
these are the kind of questions, right? You got to, again, team sport. I want to circle back to something. One of the other questions I had for sales: what landing pages produce the most trials and subscriptions? So that's exactly what you called out, right? So what's working today? And then let's ask the extended question that I like to ask is, have we expanded them? Have we adapted them? Have we got more of them? And then the big one that, again, I sort of, rant about search people that are all gung ho about topics and topic clusters, and yet nobody really looks at the customer journey or all the exposure across a topic cluster is in simply asking the question, are we represented across the customer journey? And when I was doing search and when we had Data Prism and definitely at Global Strategies, we did this analysis for people. We'd look at sometimes tens of millions of keyword phrases, all segmented across the buyer's journey. And we never found anyone that had even an 80%, complete representation across that. Meaning, I remember one was for, an electronics company where you put in like flat screen TV or smart TV from that first query. And then they were there often for that because that's what, that's a head term that the search team chased. And then a model, they would be there, obviously. But little in the middle, going back to your engineering point, a lot of the feature functions.
What's the weight? Can you hang it on a wall?
Exactly.
You know,
I remember Samsung, IBM sent me to Samsung in Korea for like, I don't know, a couple weeks. And they built this amazing web screen where you could put in because remember back in the old days, everybody had the cabinets.
mhm.
The entertainment centers, I think,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
technical term for it, right?
The two towers with the bar across the top.
Right.
Yeah,
And then your limit of the size of your TV was the space in your entertainment center.
right.
And interestingly enough, TVs are sold diagonally
Yeah,
because it's bigger diagonally than it is horizontally or vertically,
that's a
right?
marketing person's.
Right.
Someone smart came up with that idea.
It's 85 inches diagonally,
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, well, how does that, but yet the entertainment center is still diagonal, but it was restricted. Actually, people were thinking, horizontal and vertical space. That was the question on there. And so we actually had to convert that just for that one feature that they were putting on the configurator for TVs. We had to go to engineering and have them convert basically the horizontal, or we had to tease out of a database, if it would fit, and then map that to the size dimensions for these pull downs.
mm.
And it was really interesting. There was such a disconnect between that. So again, just to bring it back to this article, was we need a set of KPIs that multiple people can understand and appreciate and benefit from their participation in driving things that can affect digital. Let's keep it broad to digital, but also specifically search. And then we want our senior leaders to be asking questions like the one you said, what is dumping people into our lead queue? What percentage of people are in there? And then I'm the opposite. It's like, okay, of the 80% that are abandoning, do we know why they're abandoning? And can we figure that out? And can we improve that? What content is driving engagement? What content is not driving engagement? If we post something in the socials, is that, and we've seen that. I mean, this was one of the things with a drink site. It was interesting if we posted a drink recipe midweek, by the end of the week, we could almost always see an increase in queries, either for drinks in that color or with that ingredient. People wouldn't remember the name.
Mm.
And they might not want to scroll through our 10,000 post feed. So we would find a correlation to searches on those drinks. So just simply tying those two together was very powerful. And I sort of summed up the article saying, really, the companies, they win by not just having a great SEO agency or digital agency or a great digital team, but it's a great team where the entire organization is thinking about their contribution to this performance. And we have senior leadership that's both enforcing this collaboration and enabling it by making sure that, and I'm seeing this a lot in search lately where some product centric functionality is trumping resources for search. In the very feature function set of some of the products, there's no resources to create the content. Like somebody was telling me the other day, yeah, we're launching this new product, but they cut they cut our search team. So we don't really have anybody to create content to call out and amplify the features to connect
Sure.
people at the feature point. And this was one of these things where
And
one of the things that the brand said made that unnecessary is, I read a study that said more people are doing brand queries than doing non-branded queries. And so because they're doing brand queries, we need to do all the other marketing, and that's going to attract people to our new product.
you have to do so much work to create an impression of a brand that people search for. I mean, they got to know, like, and trust you. You have to get in front of them 100 times, and there's all that lost opportunity before they even know the brand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let me flip it back to
That's
you.
just crazy. It's like, is the goal to launch a product or is the goal to sell the product?
It depends on whose goal it is.
Yeah, that's right.
Some people it is to launch it and then they're done. Because guess what? Marketing and sales, it's their job to sell and promote it. And then engineering, we're done. We delivered the product. We delivered the web pages. It's somebody else. And that's an interesting thing when you start to make it a team sport. I'll give you an example at a company where we were launching something new and we wanted to leverage press releases to get links because they're a big company and this was a sort of in their product portfolio set, but new enough where people wouldn't think, again, back to your point about brand. They're not going to be the first people you would think of for this. It was sort of product set adjacent. Like they were going into a verticalization play. And so we went to PR and said, when you launch this, we want you to link to the product. We want you to have a link to the page where we talk about the function. And they're like, nope. We don't put links. We put a link at the bottom to the brand, and that's etched in stone. And we're like, that's sort of how we used to do stuff in the old days. Can you please do it? And nope. Our standards are we put one link in the footer to the brand. And like, but what about the digital ones? When the people take your press release and they actually put it on their website, imagine if when they did that, they did their copy and paste, links were already into exactly where we need them to go. That would be awesome. There was one person who was a little rogue and they said, yeah, okay, I'm going to do it. Because, they were looking for another job anyways. And they said, yeah, let me try it. But what we did for that person so that they didn't do this in vain is we got from them all the pickups because, a PR agency is going to tell you, it's like the old days, they bring you the binder with the page from the magazine. Now it's a binder with the printed web page with the highlighter saying, this is a link we got you. This is the review, the report. And so what we did is we took that list of all the places they said we got pickups and we put that in and we mined the referral to these pages. And then we created a report that highlighted all of the traffic that came from the places that the PR agency got us pickups that resulted, so they got the listing. And because they used they scraped the press release, they had the links in it, it was there. So we gave them 100% of that traffic. And this guy was able to come in with this, it was actually a she. She came in with the report and said, you violated this, we're going to have a chat. I said, but look at all the traffic we drove. And then we got the senior leader to basically thank them for all the traffic they drove. And we just cared about the links. And within like 5 days of this new product, we were number 2 or number 3. Because, it was a well done page, it was indexed, but the backlinks from all these reputable, topically relevant places that we would have never got if they would have followed their normal rules.
Yeah.
We were able to show. So this is another thing by, again, okay, their KPI is pickups. and references and sort of, what is it, column space or something like that. And we gave them another stat that showed they did good. And then we actually could show how many downloads and trials that they drove. And so because they were now part of these other KPIs they never had and that they did good, they got a pat on the back and it changed their model because now they said, okay, now we can tie this to revenue, which they'd never been able to do before. And so it all come from because now we had this kumbaya environment to say, yeah, you're going to do this. We're going to show you how you contributed to revenue or you contributed to signups. And because senior people anointed this, we were able to do good. And that's the whole takeaway is the leadership needs to ask better, different questions. They need to sort of pull you kicking and streaming into strategic and revenue focused reporting. The various digital teams need to think about their reporting more strategically and revenue focused. And then we need to sort of rope in others that contribute to this output, this outcome, if you will, and maybe give credit where credit is due, share the credit and share the misery. It was an interesting question.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Yeah, by establishing KPIs for various teams, I think, companies, especially startups, can align their goals together. We should really be looking for cross-functional collaboration between teams to effectively implement SEO strategies. For instance, we could optimize on keywords for a specific launch or we didn't talk about this, but I think one thing that most people fail to leverage is events. So, back in the day, the biggest line item budget in marketing used to be trade shows. There's so much you can do online to promote it in advance, to follow up afterwards. If you're working with the email group, you could create some really great landing pages for them and even create processes like almost instant digital response with URLs back to your site. So it should be really a company-wide SEO integration, not confined to just a marketing team.
Totally agree. Team sport.
Team sport. Maybe that's what we'll call this episode. SEO is a team sport. All right.
Cool.
Anything else?
No, I think that's it. Let us know your thoughts in the Facebook group. Yeah. Tell us topics you want us to cover, things you'd like me to rant about. And we really think there's a lot we can talk about this team sport angle. And really, again, it ties back to this idea of web effectiveness and making your website and your web presence and digital far more effective than what it is. So check out some of our courses on international web mastery, but definitely please, like us, recommend us, let us know. That gives us the feedback we need to know we're connecting with people. If you didn't like something, let us know. If you liked it, let us know and tell us what you want us to talk about.
Yeah, your feedback helps motivate us to keep making these and plan future episodes. Follow us by going to International Web Mastery on LinkedIn, Facebook, and X. Let us know. Thanks. Good to see you, Bill.
Good to see you. Have a good one.
Hey, this is Bill Scully. I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training course called Demystifying hreflang. It includes 6 modules and is over an hour long with a quiz at the end of each module. You can find it at internationalwebmastery.com. Hope to see you there.